So over the years, I've heard a lot of people say that they went to their teachers and elders and they were told that they cannot be a proper witch unless they renounce Christianity. Now there is some bullshit in this, although there is something to say about releasing yourself from other people's worldviews. So I just want to address that today. Welcome to my channel. You are entering the world of magic and mysticism with your host, Lee W. Johnson. Keep the lights on and help improve the channel by becoming a supporter for just $2.99 per month. Hit the join button. Now, the problem we face when we move from a Christian faith onto a pagan path is that there is a lot of programming that has taken place, especially from an early age, and we get tied into this worldview. And in order to move onto a pagan path, we need to release ourselves from that worldview itself. That worldview may consist of things like you have to give all your hopes and dreams to a disembodied old man in the clouds, or we have to distinguish between right and wrong or good and evil. In fact, we don't even get to distinguish. We are told what is right and wrong and what is good and evil, and we have to follow it. So all these aspects within this Christian worldview that we need to release ourselves from in order to move on to a pagan path. And as we continue, we find that these things become more subjective and more personal, and someone else's worldview is no longer ours. So this really all becomes or boils down to creating your own worldview and your own path at the end of the day. But in order to do that, we need to step off someone else's path. The problem is, I found over the years, there's a lot of pagan teachers who kind of just sit there and say, my way or the highway. You have to follow their path, or you cannot be a proper witch. Now, I will get into trying on different worldviews just now. But if anybody tells you their way or the highway, that is a Christian worldview. If you are not a Christian, then you are going to hell and you follow the devil and all of this stuff, which is purely Christian mythology. But it really is, you have to do it our way because our way is the only right way. That's a load of bullshit. That's rubbish. So if a pagan teacher comes along and tells you that, then they are probably still tied into their own Christian worldview themselves. They are still tethered to that Christian life that they had, and they have taken that aspect and that teaching of you have to do it my way, or because there is no other way, and they brought it into this so-called pagan practice. Now, when it does come to mixing Christianity and witchcraft, there are some difficulties and some problems with this, obviously. It's going to be a bit of a hit and miss situation because Christianity is monotheistic, witchcraft is mostly polytheistic, can be pantheistic, animistic, etc., but it's definitely not monotheistic. And trying to fit those two together is like trying to put a round peg in a square hole. It just will not work. However, what you can do, and this is what other people have done, you can take the entities from the Christian or the Catholic faith, so whether it's Jesus, Mary, the Holy Guardian Angel, the saints, the angels, the archangels, etc. You can take those entities and you can work with them in a framework of witchcraft. But once you do that, you are no longer following a monotheistic path. Therefore, you are no longer following a Christian path. A lot of people are referring to themselves as being Christian witches. And this is where things kind of break down a little bit, and misunderstandings come in. There are a lot of traditions and faiths and paths which are around worldwide nowadays, which do have a lot of Christian integration in them, but it doesn't make them Christian. One of the prime examples here would be hoodoo. When the slaves were being brought over to America, they were forced to integrate Christianity and Catholicism into their practice. They were forced to actually follow that faith. So what they did, they took the saints and they integrated those into the practice. The saints represented the different loa and the spirits, and the Bible became very much part of the practice. But that was all in order to hide their own practice so that they could actually survive. Because if you didn't follow the Christian or Catholic faith of the slave master, you were killed. So in order to survive, they had to integrate those things into their own practice. But nowadays, people obviously don't have those same threats of being killed by a slave master. But those aspects have become so integrated that they are part of the practice. And even if you go into traditional witchcraft, you'll find a lot of mention of Christianity. A lot of the prayers and the spoken spells and things like that, which you may come across from older books, have a Christian aspect and a Christian element. They will call on God and such things, because over the years that integration happened. Anybody who follows or says that they are Famtrad, who comes from a lineage of witches in their family that dates back a couple centuries, will have Christian elements in their own practice. But any family tradition of the craft that comes from, say, England, for example, is going to have a lot of Christian elements in the practice. And you'll also find that people who do follow those old ways, and the old folk who do practice those old ways, will probably not refer to themselves as witches. They'll probably use titles like cunning folk, or cunning man, cunning woman, or green gown, or something similar. So you don't even have to call yourself a witch. It's just, witch has become very much a blanket term, an umbrella term. 15-20 years ago it was pagan. Pagan was the blanket term for all of these practices. Now all of a sudden it's become witch, and even to the extent of Wicca. People are calling themselves Wiccans left, right and centre when they're not actually practicing Wicca. But you don't have to call yourself a witch at the end of the day. It's all about creating your own worldview. So what do you need to do? What you need to do is release yourself from the tethers of that previous faith. This can be a very difficult task. It can actually go on for years and years, especially if that faith was programmed from an early age. You're going to have that worldview ingrained in you. So it can take a very, very long time for this to actually happen. And you'll find after a couple of decades, you'll still fall back onto those worldviews. But it usually becomes a bit easier to catch at that stage. But what you want to try and do is release yourself from those bonds, from those tethers. And as you do, you start to find yourself becoming freer. And you start to loosen up those ties. And what you can then do is try on a different worldview, and try and find one that fits you nicely. It's not too baggy, it's not too tight, a nice fit, so that you can actually feel comfortable while you're exploring this worldview. And then create a love affair with it. Get to know it, get to know its dislikes and its likes, get to know its depths, get to know its difficulties, its happinesses, its joys, everything. Try and get to know everything about that worldview. Then when you get to a point where you feel you know it well enough at that stage, you can explore it more, you can carry on with it. Or you can come along and try on a different worldview. Get to know that worldview. Now, coming from a Christian background, you may find this a little bit difficult because we are told we are only allowed to do things a particular way. We are only allowed to follow one particular God, and that programming is going to kick in. But once you try on a different worldview, you can try on another one. It doesn't mean you completely reject this worldview that you've just tried on. You can keep it around. But now you're trying on a different worldview. You're creating a relationship with something else. And you can then explore that one. Get to know it. Create a relationship with it. Again, create a love affair with it. And then once you get to know that, you'll probably find it helps with the creation of your own path, your own worldview that you're trying to develop. And you can take things which integrate and mix well with this other worldview. Now, bear in mind, this is not eclecticism. We're not just willy-nilly taking things left, right and centre, here and there and everywhere and smashing them all together and hoping they will work. We are finding things within one worldview which resonates with something in another worldview, and we are bringing them together in order to create a balance, a harmony. And in order to do that, you have to understand each worldview properly, because if you don't, you won't know which parts to put together. But putting those parts together can help you to grow more. It can help you to understand teachings and aspects within each worldview, because one may explain it better for you than another one, whereas another aspect in this one may help to explain something within this worldview, and you start to understand, you start to gain knowledge. So it's all about trying on these different worldviews, but not just trying them on like an outfit and then taking it off the next day and throwing it away. It's about creating a love affair with it, about creating a bond, creating a relationship, and understanding it completely so that you can then bring things together and start to develop your own path and your own worldview. But in order to do that, you do need to step off someone else's worldview. And this is the problem with faiths like Christianity. You get told what to do, you get told how to worship, you get told what to believe in, and you are then traveling on someone else's worldview. And you'll find that this path that you start to create becomes a crooked path, and then you start to understand witchcraft. So this is going to be, it's not going to be a path that is paved straight from A to Z. It's going to be a path that has twists and turns and bends and curves and everything else along the way. And all of those twists and turns, you're going to find all these nuggets, little nuggets of hope and happiness within them. And you're going to come across some nasty little beasties that you're going to run away from. But that's part of the learning process. So in a sense, rejecting your Christian faith or your Catholic faith has some grounds to it, but to say to somebody you cannot be a proper witch until you renounce Christianity, that's Christianity. That's a Christian person saying you have to renounce Satan in order to be a Christian. That's just somebody who has come from a Christian background and still has the ties and bonds to that Christian worldview. You're not going to renounce Christianity. There are some methods in order to deprogram, which are kind of renouncing in a way, but that's done in order to step off someone else's path, someone else's worldview, in order to free yourself from it, so that you can then explore your own way, your own path, and start to build your own worldview. But those are just practices in order to deprogram you in order to get you to loosen those bonds and to shake them up a little bit. So sometimes we need a good shaking up in order to actually move forward, instead of just sitting there and letting somebody else tell us what to do and how to practice. Now, this actually brings up the question, is there such thing as a proper witch? And I would have to say no. If we actually have a look at the definition of proper, it says denoting something that is truly what it is said or regarded to be. Now, can a witch be a proper witch? A witch is so diverse, and no two witches are the same. We may have, things which overlap, understandings, teachings, particular aspects within our worldviews which do overlap and are common. But no two witches are the same. No two witches have exactly the same worldview. So you cannot tell a witch to follow your way, because that's just ridiculous. So can we have a proper witch? No, we can't. It's just not possible. And I don't think anybody can actually ever say they are a proper witch. So anybody who tells you that you can't be a proper witch until you do X, Y, and Z, then tell them to sod off, really. They are just really still tied in with their own Christian worldview, and they have taken that lesson of you have to do it my way because it's the only right way, and they've brought it into their own practice, and that's what they're trying to force people into. So just be wary of this. If you do find a teacher or an elder who does say something like this, I will say, there is some people who will do this. I doubt they will ever use the term proper witch. You can't be a proper witch until whatever. But there are some teachers who will incorporate practices, methods, in order to give you that shake-up, so that you can start loosening the bonds. And those can be quite severe practices. You probably consider them to be severe because of that Christian bondage that you are experiencing. So it may feel like a violation, but a proper teacher will guide you through it, and will help you through the whole process. But they may incorporate certain things which are going to shake you up. And just be discerning, and make sure your teacher is somebody who you can actually trust, and then you should be okay. And if you do have doubts, ask why they're doing this, or ask somebody else who you do trust, and ask them their opinion. Okay, so I think that's it for today. That's what I really wanted to get into, and so I will see you on Wednesday for Ask Lee. Have a good one for now. Cheers.